today, inspired it, and all those who have come. Less than 5 years into flag independence, the doyen of social democracy, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, penned his autobiography, Not Yet Uhuru. Matters have since gotten worse. The masses in Kenya can hardly breathe. Across our land and nation, disrespect for human dignity reigns. There are families surviving on 1 meal per day. Healthcare for all remains a distant dream. Many parents cannot afford school fees. Place their hopes on charity. Kenya is now rated one of the most unequal societies globally, with an annual rate of growth that provides little hope that our nation will provide a place to feel at home for all our people. Just before independence, Jaramogi told the Nyapara of colonial rule, and I quote, "Kenya is Marwa," which means Kenya is ours. Perhaps he spoke too early, for it didn't take long before Fanon's Wretched of the Earth foresight on the pitfalls of independence without a truly progressive and nationalist ruling class was demonstrated as from one country to the other in Africa through military coups. The new and productive African ruling class, who are only interested in the power and the benefits of power, have continued to enrich themselves and not look after the plight of the poor, which is the major cause of state failure today. One of the things that Jaramogi was committed to liberate Africans from. A generation has found itself landless and homeless even 60 years after independence. Many still live as squatters in overcrowded former Mau Mau villages and informal settlements in Kenya. Jaramogi was earnest when he wrote his book, Not Yet Uhuru, boldly stating that, and I quote, "The struggle for independence is not just about freedom from colonialism, it's also about the struggle for economic, social, and political justice for all." He was categorical that the struggle for independence, I quote, was about improving the lives of all Kenyans. As long as there are downtrodden people in the nation of Kenya, the struggle for liberation in Kenya, as elsewhere in Africa, remains urgent and an imperative. That struggle is still urgent and imperative even today. Vice President Jaramogi Oginga Odinga witnessed it all. The scramble for post-colonial or colonial assets, the rapid transfer of public property to private hands, and the rise of an authoritarian presidential state. He saw individuals and some former nationalists troop to the seat of power in pursuit of special interests. He saw firsthand the seeds of present-day major graft planted and the disdain for the citizen displayed among the ruling class. This was not the Kenya Jaramogi had dreamt of. Certainly not. Without shame or sense of guilt, this class accumulated land at an alarming speed, driving poor peasants out of their ancestral homes when it suited them. Jaramogi faced constant intrigues in the ruling party KANU. To isolate all progressive forces, decided to finally resign from the government to form the Kenya People's Union in 1966. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was detained without trial, as you have heard, and the government mounted a witch hunt against all progressive forces. Jaramogi remained unbogable. and continued the struggle for multi-party democracy, dignity and social justice, up to his last breath. Exactly 30 years ago today, we fondly remember Jaramogi as steadfast, modest, honest, consistent, a diligent farmer, teacher, mentor, a Pan-Africanist, nationalist, a realist who was earnest in his advocacy for the liberation of the wretched of the earth in Kenya and elsewhere in the world. Koigi wa Mwere got it right. He said Jaramogi Oginga Odinga was one of the few politicians whose politics was driven by ideology than personal whims, and by a vision that would have been a compass by which he would have led the ship of state had he been president of this country, unquote. To the disbelief of many, Jaramogi hung Kenyatta's portrait on the wall of his Kisumu home, together with portraits of great freedom fighters like Nyerere, Nkrumah, and Gabriel Abdel Nasser of Egypt. When asked why he would give Kenyatta this honor, he said, and I quote, he had no power to revise history and deny that Kenyatta fought and suffered for the freedom of Kenya. His honesty and respect for history was engraved on his walls, notwithstanding his differences with Jomo Kenyatta. Those of us who led the second liberation struggle have walked in the footsteps of Jaramogi, consistently working with his son Raila Amolo Odinga. Jaramogi lives on in the basic structure of our struggle. The Constitution respects and honors, and I quote, those who heroically struggle to bring freedom and justice to our land, unquote. Jaramogi's name and footprint is in it and remains indelible. Devolution, as enshrined in the 2010 Constitution, is a fruit of the second liberation. The preamble recognizes the aspirations of all Kenyans for a government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law. Values that Jaramogi espoused in his life, struggled for, and suffered for. And, as I have written elsewhere, that the annals of history, in the genesis and evolution of modern nations, only has a few visionary leaders who shaped the destiny of such nations at critical moments in history. In the case of Kenya, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga will always stand tall among the nationalists who shaped the destiny of our nation. 30 years on, it's still a long walk to freedom, but we shall get there. Long live Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. Long live his vision and inspiration. Long live his words and advice. Notie Uhuru, aluta continua. I will now hand it over to my colleague and comrade, Professor Michael Chege, with whom I have worked very closely since the 1960s.